Okay, so what I wanted to show you guys was some simple stuff that we'll often do when we're introducing a dog to an e-collar. And oftentimes the way I like to explain how to do this is to explain what people do wrong. Just because we see a lot of people have kind of a negative association towards e-collars. And when they're used wrong, they're not a very good tool, I'll be completely honest with you. But when they're used right, we can use them on low levels. It's a teaching tool, it's a guidance tool, it can be a great tool. But one reason we see people get these collars is for coming when called, right? Their dog doesn't come when called. And so what they'll do is they'll put the collar on, they tell the dog to come, the dog doesn't come, and they'll hit the button. Now on certain occasions, I'll be honest, that does work. It can work. But generally what happens is, if you see it from the dog's perspective, he's 30 yards over there, and he feels this little stimulation. Now, and that's of course if they're using a low level, but the dog feels just kind of this little tiny stimulation and things like that. And so nothing in the dog's mind registers, oh, something's tickling my neck, I should run back to the owner. But oftentimes if you see it from the owner's perspective, they're like, darn it, it's not working, the dog's not coming. And so maybe they'll use a higher level, or maybe they'll keep hitting it or whatever. And so from the dog's perspective, they're like, man, this is painful, I don't like this. Sometimes I've even seen people train their dogs to run away, because what they'll do is they'll hit the button, the dog is like so freaked out he runs the opposite direction. And so what we need to do is we need to take time and teach the dog what the little stimulation means. This is a language. It's a language like any other language. The e-collar is a language is what I mean. And it's a language like any other language in the sense that, it's foreign to this dog right now. This is day one of training with this dog. And so it's foreign to this dog, and so she has no idea what it means, what it does, any of that. And so how do we understand language? If I want to learn Spanish or French or German or whatever, how do I understand it? Is I have to associate something with those new sounds and those new gestures or whatever the case might be. The same is true with the dog with this new language. There's got to be something associated with it, otherwise it just comes out of the blue and the dog has no clue what it means. And so, like I say, a lot of owners in their attempts to get the dog to understand go really high, and this is where a lot of people have a very negative idea of e-collars, is because, they use them on such this high level, and you get this dog screaming and stuff like that, and of course we don't want that. So there's a very simple exercise that we'll often do in the very beginning stages to start teaching the dog about stimulation and what it means, what this new language means. And so I'm always going to start this with a leash, and it could be 4 or 6 foot leash. I don't even have a training collar on right now. There's no pinch collar or anything like that. It's just a simple slip leash. I'm just going to use very light stimulation. I'm going to hold it down. Come on, good girl. And so the second she starts coming to me is when I release that button. Good girl. And I'm using a very, very low level, just enough for her to kind of barely recognize it. And so I hold it down. Come on, good girl. And you can tell, oh, what a good puppy. You can tell that as she feels it, there's just, you might not be able to tell on video, I can tell because I'm right here, but there's just a slight turn of the head. She feels it like, what is that? And so it's just this little sensation that comes from nowhere. So, 1, 2, come here. Good girl. What a good girl. Oh, you're so happy. You're so happy. Good girl. And so, now what I'm doing in addition to this is, of course, verbally I'm calling her, but also I'm using just the slightest bit of pressure on that leash so that she realizes that when she feels a little bit of pressure and she comes, that little tickle's going to shut off. And so what does this lead to as time goes on? Well, it leads to a dog that we take off leash, and the dog says in their mind, oh, I'm off leash now, I don't have to come anymore. And then I can use just some very light stimulation and it makes sense to the dog. Oh, what a good girl. And I'm already starting to get some nice focus here where she's voluntarily, oh, you're so pretty, wanting to come in and pay attention to me. Oh, what a good girl. What a good girl. And so I'm going to get her away from me here. Okay. Good girl. Good girl. So we see she's very intent on staying with me. Good girl. Good girl. Always a good girl. Come here. Always a good girl. And so this is, like I say, one of the ways that we'll introduce the e-collar to a dog in the very beginning stages. Now, we want the dog to, I always talk about context, that we want the dog to understand the e-collar in various contexts. In one context, the e-collar means to come. In another context, the e-collar means to go to your bed. In other contexts, it might mean to sit or something like that. But in the beginning stages, we'll just teach the dog, tiny little tickle, come back to me. Tiny little tickle, come back to me. And soon we get focus. And from that focus, we start talking to the dog about a lot of other things we want them to understand. So hopefully that makes sense. Leave comments below if you've got questions, and we'll talk to you soon.